At 7 a.m., my jobless sister burst into the apartment I rent from our parents, announcing, "I'm moving in." Mom smirked. "We're doubling your rent to help with costs." When I calmly said I'd be moving out instead, they laughed. So I packed up and took every piece of furniture. You know that gut-wrenching feeling when your entire world, the one you've painstakingly built, just implodes? Mine did at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday with a single knock at the door that didn't just rattle the frame, but shattered every illusion I had about my family. What if I told you that my own parents tried to force me into a living situation I couldn't stand, and then doubled my rent to pay for it? Yeah, you heard that right. And you're probably wondering what the hell happened next. For years, I genuinely thought I had it all figured out. My name's Allison, I'm 28, and I was absolutely crushing it as a social media marketer. My job at Digital Pulse was more than just a paycheck. It was my passion. Our office was this gorgeous, modern space downtown, all glass and collaborative vibes, with a break room that had kombucha on tap. My desk overlooked the city skyline, a constant reminder of how far I'd come. I was on the verge of a big promotion, my salary was fantastic, and I was diligently saving 20% of every check for my own place. My future was bright, carefully planned, brick by financial brick. Then there was my apartment, my sanctuary. It was a one-bedroom I rented from my parents at a ridiculously good price, in a quiet neighborhood close enough to work, but far enough to be my escape. I'd poured my heart and soul into making it mine. Every piece of furniture, from the plush sectional to the antique coffee table I refinished myself, had a story. My kitchen, though small, was a chef's dream with a Vitamix and an espresso machine. And my bedroom? Pure bliss, memory foam mattress, high thread couch sheets, a cozy reading nook. This wasn't just an apartment. It was a testament to years of hard work, careful planning, and a deep desire for independence. Now, my family, that's where things get complicated, especially with my sister, Stephanie. She's 3 years younger, and honestly, she was always Mom and Dad's favorite. While I worked multiple jobs through college and graduated with minimal debt, Stephanie went to an expensive private university, changed majors 3 times, and had everything paid for. When she needed a car, they bought her one. I got a loan. When I was laid off early in my career, they offered me a loan with interest. When she lost a job, she moved back home rent-free. I loved my family, but I'd long accepted that there were different rules for Stephanie and for me. So I built my own life, fiercely independent. This apartment arrangement felt like a rare win for me, a way to benefit from family without losing my autonomy. But there were always warning signs, little tremors before the earthquake. A couple of weeks before that fateful Tuesday, Stephanie texted me out of the blue. Unusual. Then my mom called, casually mentioning Stephanie and her boyfriend broke up, and she'd quit her job. I remember the uneasy twinge when Mom said, "Your sister is going through such a difficult time. Family needs to stick together." I nodded sympathetically, completely oblivious to the storm brewing. The night before everything changed, I was scrolling Pinterest, dreaming up a kitchen backsplash project. I had no idea my peace, my plans, my entire life would be shattered by a knock at the door within 24 hours. It started exactly at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, not 7:30, when my alarm was set, but 7 o'clock. That insistent pounding dragged me from a deep sleep, disoriented, half asleep, hair probably sticking straight up. I stumbled to the door. Package delivery? Maintenance emergency? I swung it open, and there she was, Stephanie, 2 massive suitcases, a duffel bag, and her designer purse. Her perfectly styled hair was in a messy ponytail, her eyes puffy. "Hey, sis," she said, with forced cheerfulness that didn't reach her eyes. "Surprise. I'll be staying with you for a while." I stood there, frozen. My brain was lagging. Stephanie, what are you talking about? What are you doing here so early? She just pushed past me, rolling her luggage into my living room. Mark and I broke up. He cheated. Can you believe it? And then my boss was being completely unreasonable about me needing time off to process it. So I had to quit. I just can't deal with toxic work environments on top of heartbreak. I closed the door slowly, trying to think. I'm sorry about Mark and your job. Really? That's tough. But Steph, this is a one-bedroom apartment. There's no space for you here. Why didn't you go to Mom and Dad's? She flopped dramatically onto my sofa. Their house is being renovated. Remember? The guest room is completely torn apart. Besides, Dad snores so loudly now, and Mom's on this health kick. Only kale and quinoa in the house. I'd go crazy there. She looked around, her eyes sparkling. This place is perfect. You've always had great taste, Ally. I winced. Ally, a childhood nickname I'd outgrown years ago. Stephanie, I work from home 2 days a week. I need my space. This really won't work. Just then, my phone rang. Mom. My stomach dropped. I knew. I just knew. Allison, your sister is there, right? Mom didn't wait for my confirmation. I want you to make her feel welcome. She's going through a very difficult time, and she needs family support right now. Mom, I understand she's having a hard time, but my apartment is too small for 2 people. Maybe we could help her find a place of her own, or she could stay with Jessica. I suggested, naming Stephanie's friend with a 2-bedroom. Jessica isn't family, my mother snapped. Family takes care of each other. Allison, your sister needs you right now. This is not the time to be selfish. I took a deep breath, moving to the kitchen so Stephanie wouldn't overhear. It's not about being selfish, Mom. There is literally no space here. I don't have an extra bedroom. She can sleep on the couch. It's temporary until she gets back on her feet. Mom's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. How temporary are we talking about? I asked, watching Stephanie unpack her toiletries and arrange them on my coffee table. As long as she needs, Mom replied vaguely. Now stop being difficult. I raised you better than this. Do I need to get your father involved? The threat hung in the air, thick and heavy. Dad would be even worse. Any protest from me would be labeled ungrateful, selfish. I'd been through this script a million times. Fine, I conceded, the word weighing a ton. She can stay for now, but we need to figure out a more permanent solution soon. That's my good girl, Mom said, instantly warm again. Call me if you need anything. Love you both. After hanging up, I just stood there, watching Stephanie make herself at home, rearranging my throw pillows, placing her framed photos next to mine. A wave of invasion washed over me. I swallowed it down. The couch pulls out into a bed, I said, forcing a neutral tone. We'll need to put it back during the day, so I can work. I have meetings Tuesdays and Thursdays. Stephanie barely looked up. Actually, I was thinking I'd take the bedroom. The living room gets so much light in the morning, and, I'm not a morning person. Plus, I have all these clothes that need to be hung up. I stared at her, disbelief rising. Stephanie, this is my apartment. I am not giving up my bedroom. She looked at me with that same expression she'd used on our parents for years, a perfect blend of hurt and indignation. Wow, Ally, I just lost my boyfriend and my job. I'm at my lowest point, and you can't even make a small sacrifice to help me? The living room is bigger anyway. I held my ground. You can have the couch. That's already a compromise. The standoff might have continued, but my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Asterisk, be kind to your sister. Remember all the times she was there for you. Asterisk, I honestly couldn't recall those supposed instances, but I knew this battle wasn't worth fighting. Not today. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. You can use the living room, but we need to establish some ground rules. Stephanie's face instantly brightened. You're the best sister ever. This is going to be so fun, like when we were kids and shared a room. I didn't have the heart to remind her those days had been far from idyllic, with her constantly borrowing my things and complaining to our parents when I tried to set boundaries. As she cheerfully continued unpacking, I texted Laura, my closest friend. Steph just moved in. No warning, no choice. Send wine and patience. Her immediate reply. Oh no. Nightmare flashbacks to college roommate days. Coming over tonight with emergency supplies. Hang in there. Looking at my sister, singing to herself as she claimed more and more of my space. I wondered how long I could actually hang in there before something had to give. The first week was every bit as challenging as I'd feared. While I kept my 7 a.m. wake-up and 8:30 start time, Stephanie usually slept until noon. Not a huge issue, except my once peaceful living room had become a chaotic bedroom, fashion boutique, and makeup studio all rolled into one. On a Wednesday, I had a crucial video call. I had to carefully angle my laptop, trying to avoid showing the blanket-strewn sofa, the makeup scattered on my coffee table, the clothes draped everywhere. When my boss commented on my unusual background, I mumbled something about redecorating, vowing to talk to Stephanie that evening. But talking to my sister was impossible. I suggested she look for a job. She sighed dramatically and said she was healing. I asked her to clean up. She promised she would, but never did. I mentioned my skyrocketing grocery bill. She reminded me she was going through trauma and needed comfort food. By the end of that first week, my meticulously stocked fridge was raided. My meal prep containers for work lunches were mysteriously empty. My expensive specialty coffee beans, gone. Even my hidden stash of dark chocolate had been discovered and depleted. Stephanie, I said one evening, finding her wrapped in my favorite throw, watching reality TV at full volume. We need to talk about some house rules. She looked up, annoyed. Can it wait until commercial break? No, it cannot. I've been trying to talk to you all week. I sat down across from her, pulling out a notepad where I jotted down some basic guidelines. First, quiet hours when I'm working or sleeping. Second, we need to discuss shared expenses like groceries and utilities, which have gone up since you arrived. Third, personal space and belongings. Stephanie rolled her eyes. Are you seriously giving me a roommate contract? I'm your sister, not some random person off Craigslist. That's exactly why we need clear boundaries, I explained, trying to keep my voice level. Because we're sisters, things can get complicated if we don't communicate clearly. She laughed, actually laughed, and turned back to her show. You've always been so uptight, ally. Just relax. This isn't forever. How long is it then? I pressed. Have you started looking for jobs or apartments? She sighed heavily. Can you stop pressuring me? I told you I'm taking time to process my breakup. Besides, Mom and Dad said I could stay here as long as I need to. That was the moment something clicked for me. Wait, what exactly did Mom and Dad tell you about staying here? Stephanie shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Just that you had plenty of space, could use the company, and that since they own the building, it's basically like staying with family anyway. My blood began to boil. Without another word, I stepped onto my small balcony and called my parents. My father answered on the fourth ring. Dad, did you and Mom tell Stephanie she could move in with me indefinitely without even asking me first? There was a pause. Allison, your sister is going through a difficult time. The apartment is plenty big enough for both of you, temporarily. We thought you'd want to help family. But it's not temporary, is it? She has no plans to look for a job or her own place, and she's not contributing anything to the household. My father's tone hardened. Your mother and I give you a significant discount on rent for that apartment. Many people would be grateful for such an arrangement. The message was clear. This apartment wasn't really mine. It was a family asset to be reallocated as they saw fit. My rent payments, my life here for years, meant nothing. I am grateful, I said carefully, but I also need to be able to live my life. Stephanie isn't respecting my space or my things. You've always been the responsible one, Allison, my father said, his voice softening into that manipulative tone I knew so well. Stephanie needs that stability right now. Just give her some time to get back on her feet. Be the big sister. By the time I ended the call, my frustration had turned into crushing resignation. This was the same old dynamic, Stephanie's needs always taking precedence over mine. The situation spiraled. Stephanie invited friends over without warning, often when I was on work calls. She borrowed my clothes and returned them stained or stretched out. The water bill doubled from her 40-minute showers, twice a day. Electricity bills spiked from her constant use of my styling tools. My peaceful mornings were gone, replaced by navigating around her stuff. My evenings were impossible with her loud friends or late-night calls. My weekend plans were constantly derailed by her emotional crises. The impact on my work became undeniable. I missed a deadline for the first time in my career. My boss, Diane, called me in, concerned about my sudden drop in performance. My promotion, once so promising, felt like it was slipping away. "Is everything okay at home?" Diane asked, her gaze sympathetic. I considered lying, but opted for a simplified truth. Family issues. My sister is staying with me temporarily, and it's been an adjustment. Diane nodded. Family can be complicated. Just don't let it affect your work for too long. The Henderson account is too important. That evening, I found myself staying late at the office, dreading going home. It had become a pattern, finding excuses to be anywhere but my own apartment. I canceled plans with friends because I was embarrassed by the state of my home and just plain exhausted by the constant tension. One night, after finding Stephanie had used my expensive face serum and emptied the bottle, I broke down in tears in my bathroom. I called Laura, who had become my lifeline through this nightmare. "I can't do this anymore." I sobbed. "It's like I'm a guest in my own home. My parents won't listen. Stephanie won't change. I feel trapped. Have you considered looking for another apartment?" Laura suggested gently. "On such short notice, and at current market rates, my parents charge me 30% below market for this place. I can't afford something comparable on my own." "Maybe not comparable," Laura acknowledged, "but something that is yours where you make the rules. Is your sanity worth the price difference?" As I looked around my once peaceful sanctuary, now completely overtaken, I realized Laura might be right. But before I could seriously consider that, things would take an even more dramatic turn. Exactly 1 month after Stephanie moved in, I received a call from my father while I was at work. His tone was unusually formal, almost businesslike. "Allison, your mother and I would like to have a family discussion this evening. It's important that both you and Stephanie are present. We'll come by around 7 p.m. A cold sense of dread settled in my stomach. "What's this about, Dad?" "We'll discuss everything tonight," he replied cryptically before hanging up. I spent the rest of the workday completely distracted, running through every possible scenario. Were they taking Stephanie back? Had they found her an apartment? Or was it something far worse? By the time I arrived home, Stephanie had actually tidied up, a first since her arrival. She seemed unusually quiet, constantly checking her phone. "Do you know what this meeting is about?" I asked, suspicion growing. She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Not really. Dad just said they wanted to talk to us both." Precisely at 7 p.m., my parents arrived. Mom brought a casserole, so we wouldn't have to worry about dinner, and Dad carried a folder. Alarms bells screamed in my head. We sat around my small dining table, the one I had found at a flea market and lovingly restored. My mother served the casserole while my father cleared his throat and opened the folder. Allison, as you know, your sister has been staying with you for the past month. Given that the living arrangement appears to be working out, we need to make some adjustments to your rental agreement. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. What kind of adjustments? My father slid a paper across the table. We'll need to increase your rent, starting next month. The new amount will be double what you are currently paying. I nearly choked. Double? Why would you double my rent? Well, there are 2 people living in the apartment now. My mother chimed in, as if this explained everything. That means twice the utilities, twice the wear and tear on the property. But Stephanie isn't paying anything. I pointed out, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. She doesn't have a job. Which is exactly why we need to adjust your rent, my father explained with that patient tone he used when he thought I was being obtuse. We need to cover the additional expenses Stephanie incurs while she's getting back on her feet. I looked at Stephanie. She was studying her plate intently, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She had known. Of course she had known. Let me get this straight. I said slowly, you want me to pay double rent to cover Stephanie living here, even though I didn't invite her, even though I didn't have space for her, and I'm already dealing with increased costs and disruption to my life? Now, Allison, my mother said, her voice taking on that warning tone I knew so well from childhood. Stephanie is family. Families support each other during difficult times. Then why is the support always one-directional? I asked, the words bursting out. Why am I always the one expected to give while Stephanie only takes? My father frowned. That's unfair, Allison. Your sister has had some bad luck recently. Bad luck or bad choices? The words slipped out before I could stop them. The table fell silent. Stephanie's eyes welled with tears on cue, a talent she had perfected over the years. I can't believe you would say something so cruel, my mother scolded. After everything we've done for you, giving you this beautiful apartment at below market rent for years. I have paid rent faithfully every month, I countered. I have maintained the apartment, improved it. This was a business arrangement that benefited both parties. And now the arrangement is changing, my father said firmly. The new rent will be effective from the 1st of next month. That gives you 2 weeks to adjust your budget. I looked down at the paper he'd slid across the table. The new amount would eat up nearly 70% of my monthly income after taxes. It would destroy my savings plan and make it impossible to maintain my current lifestyle. I can't afford this, I said simply, not on my current salary. Then perhaps you should look for a better-paying job, my father suggested. Or take on some freelance work. You're always talking about those side hustles people do nowadays. The casualness with which he dismissed my financial reality made something snap inside me. Years of always being the responsible one, of watching Stephanie receive endless second chances, while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition, culminated in this moment. Or, I said, my voice steady despite the anger and hurt swirling inside me. I could just move out. There was a moment of stunned silence, and then all 3 of them burst into laughter. Move out to where? My mother asked between chuckles. Do you have any idea what rental prices are like right now? You wouldn't find anything close to what you have here, even at the increased rate, my father added confidently. Your whole life is here, Stephanie chimed in. All your stuff, your routine. You wouldn't really leave. Their dismissive laughter felt like a slap in the face. They truly believed I was trapped, that I had no choice but to accept whatever terms they dictated. Perhaps worse, they thought I lacked the courage to strike out on my own. I'll start looking for a new place tomorrow. I said quietly. My father waved his hand dismissively. Allison, don't be dramatic. Just sign the new agreement, and we can all enjoy this lovely dinner your mother made. I took the pen he offered and held it over the paper for a long moment. Then I set it down and signed. I'll let you know my decision by the end of the week, I said. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable conversation, mostly between my parents and Stephanie about her plans to find herself and explore new career paths. I remained silent, a storm of emotions and thoughts churning inside me. After they left, Stephanie tried to act as if nothing had happened, turning on the television and settling into her usual spot on my sofa. They're right, she said casually. You wouldn't really move out. This place is too perfect, and you hate change. In that moment, looking at her lounging on my furniture, using my Netflix account, eating my food, and speaking with such entitled certainty, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about the rent increase. This was about respect, boundaries, and standing up for myself in a family dynamic that had been broken for far too long. I went to bed without responding, but I lay awake for hours, my mind racing with possibilities and plans. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next day, for the first time in over a year, I called in sick to work. As soon as Stephanie left for her daily coffee shop visit, where she claimed to be networking but really just scrolled social media, I sat down at my dining table with my laptop and a notebook. First, I assessed my financial situation. I'd been saving 20% of my income consistently for 3 years. While it wasn't enough for a down payment yet, it was a substantial emergency fund. Enough for first and last month's rent, a security deposit, and moving expenses. I calculated my maximum affordable rent based on the standard 30% guideline. The number was sobering, significantly less than what I currently paid, even before the proposed increase. I'd need to compromise on location, size, or amenities. Next, I reached out to 3 real estate agents specializing in rentals. I was brutally honest about my budget and timeline, explaining I needed to move within 2 weeks. 2 were doubtful, but promised to look. The third, a woman named Vanessa, was more optimistic. The market is tight, but not impossible, she assured me, especially if you're willing to consider neighborhoods a bit further from downtown or slightly smaller spaces. While waiting, I turned to my current lease agreement. I pulled out the document and read it carefully, something I admittedly should have done more thoroughly before signing. To my surprise and relief, there was no minimum lease term specified. After the initial 1-year period, which had long since passed, I was effectively on a month-to-month arrangement with a required 30 days notice to vacate. Crucially, there was no clause about furniture or fixtures. Everything I'd purchased over the years was legally mine to take. My parents had only provided the basic built-in appliances. Still, I wanted to be certain. I texted Laura, whose brother was a real estate attorney. Can you ask Kyle a hypothetical legal question about tenant rights and furniture ownership? Laura called me back 20 minutes later. Kyle says that unless specifically stated in the lease, any furniture you purchase belongs to you, regardless of who owns the building. He also said if your parents try to claim otherwise without documentation, they wouldn't have a case. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a surge of confidence. By the end of the day, Vanessa had sent me listings for 5 potential apartments. All were smaller, none had the same charm, but they were within my budget and available immediately. The following day, I took another personal day and toured all 5. The first 3 were non-starters. The 4th had potential, but was at the absolute top of my budget. The 5th apartment was the smallest at just 500 square feet, but it had been recently renovated, new flooring, new appliances. It was in a secure building with on-site laundry, and though it was 15 minutes further from my office, it was near a direct bus line. Most importantly, the landlord was willing to work with my tight timeline and offered a slight discount on the security deposit if I could move in within 10 days. I signed the lease on the spot, putting down a deposit with my credit card and scheduling a final walkthrough for the following week. As I left the building, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. I had just committed to a complete upheaval of my life in less than 48 hours. Back at my soon-to-be former apartment, I began planning the logistics. I created a detailed inventory. Must take, could sell, could donate. Moving companies were prohibitively expensive on such short notice. Even the smallest truck with minimal assistance was nearly $1,000. That evening, as Stephanie chatted on the phone with a friend about an upcoming party, completely oblivious, I reached out to my own friends. Within hours, I'd assembled a volunteer moving crew of 6 people with 2 pickup trucks and an SUV. Laura offered her garage for temporary storage, and her contractor boyfriend volunteered to help disassemble and reassemble furniture. The final piece of my plan involved timing. I checked my parents' social media. My mother had been posting about an upcoming family reunion at my aunt's house that weekend, a 3-hour drive away. They'd been talking about it for months. I'd already declined, citing work commitments. Stephanie, always eager for family attention, had confirmed her attendance. This was it. My parents and Stephanie would be gone from Friday evening until Sunday afternoon. I scheduled the move for Saturday, giving us a full day to empty the apartment of everything I owned. As the plan came together, I felt a growing sense of resolve. This wasn't just about escaping an unfair financial situation. It was about finally standing up for myself and changing a family dynamic that had been unhealthy for far too long. The night before my parents' expected ultimatum meeting, where they thought I'd sign the new rental agreement, I texted my father. Asterisk, I have made my decision about the apartment. I will discuss it with you when you return from Aunt Jean's on Sunday. Asterisk, he responded immediately. Asterisk, we need to resolve this before the weekend. Allison, your mother, and I expect you to be reasonable about this. Asterisk, I didn't reply. For once, I wouldn't be following their script. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparations. I arranged for my mail to be forwarded, scheduled utility transfers, and discreetly packed essential items while Stephanie was out. I withdrew cash for last-minute expenses, thanking my past self for maintaining meticulous records and receipts for every major purchase. By Friday evening, as I watched Stephanie pack an overnight bag for the family reunion, I felt an odd sense of calm. She had no idea that when she returned, the apartment would be transformed, and with it, our relationship. Are you sure you won't come? She asked as she headed out the door. Mom says Aunt Jean really wants to see you. I have too much work to catch up on. I replied truthfully, though not for the reasons she assumed. Have a good time. As her rideshare pulled away, I looked around the apartment that had been my home for 5 years. By this time tomorrow, it would look very different, and so would my life. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, as if the universe approved of my decision. I barely slept, a combination of anxiety and adrenaline keeping me alert. By 6 a.m., I was sorting through the final items in my closet when my phone buzzed. A text from Laura. Asterisk Operation Independence Day is a go. Troops arriving at 0800 hours. Asterisk, I smiled at her attempt to lighten the mood. By 7:30, I had dismantled my bed frame and was working on emptying my dresser when the first knock came. Laura arrived with coffee and bagels, followed closely by her boyfriend Marcus with his toolkit. Within the hour, the rest of my volunteer crew had assembled. Okay, everyone, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. Thank you all so much for helping today. The plan is to have everything out by 4 p.m. Big furniture goes first. then boxes, then all the small, loose items. We worked with surprising efficiency. Marcus and his friend took charge of disassembling the larger pieces. Laura and two others formed a box brigade from the apartment to the vehicles. I moved between groups, directing traffic and making decisions about what went where. By noon, my bedroom was completely empty. The kitchen was half-packed, and the living room furniture was ready for transport. We broke for a quick lunch of delivered sandwiches, everyone sitting on the floor in a circle since all the seating was gone. "How are you feeling?" Laura asked quietly while the others chatted. I considered the question carefully. Sad, angry, relieved, proud, all of it at once. She squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing. This is long overdue." The afternoon continued at the same pace. We made 3 trips to my new apartment, carefully arranging furniture and stacking boxes in the much smaller space. My new landlord seemed surprised by our efficiency. "Most move-ins I see are complete chaos," he commented, impressed. "You folks have a system." By 3 p.m., we were down to the final items. The apartment that had been so carefully furnished now stood eerily empty. The built-in appliances remained, along with the window blinds. Everything else, from the shower curtain to the light bulbs and lamps, was mine and had been packed away. I did a final walkthrough, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything in cabinets or closets. In the kitchen, I left an envelope on the counter containing my keys, the next month's rent check as required by my 30-day notice, and a brief letter explaining my decision. The letter was factual and unemotional, simply stating I was exercising my right to terminate the rental agreement with proper notice and had taken only my possessions. As I stood in the empty living room for the last time, Laura put her arm around my shoulders. "Ready?" she asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. With one final look, I closed and locked the door behind me. The reaction came sooner than I expected. We had just finished the final trip to my new apartment and were celebrating with pizza and beer when my phone exploded with notifications. First, a series of texts from Stephanie. Asterisk, what the hell? Allison. Where is all the furniture? Where am I supposed to sleep? Mom and Dad are furious. Asterisk, then came the phone calls. My mother first, then my father, then my mother again. I let them all go to voicemail, needing time to compose myself. When I finally listened to the messages, my mother's voice was nearly hysterical. "Allison, Elizabeth, what have you done?" "We came home to find the apartment completely empty. Is this some kind of joke? Call me immediately." My father's message was colder, more threatening. "This is completely unacceptable behavior, Allison. That furniture belongs in that apartment. You have violated your lease agreement. Call me back now before I have to take legal action." I waited until my friends had left, thanking them profusely, before finally calling my father back. His voice was tight, with barely controlled anger, when he answered. "Explain yourself," he demanded without preamble. I took a deep breath, centering myself. "I decided to move out, as I told you I might. I gave proper notice as required by the lease, paid the final month's rent, and took my belongings with me." "Your belongings?" he sputtered. "That furniture belongs in the apartment." "Actually, no," I replied calmly. "Every piece of furniture in that apartment was purchased by me with my own money. I have receipts for everything if you'd like to see them. The lease makes no mention of any furnishings provided by the landlord, which would be you and Mom." There was a moment of stunned silence before he recovered. "This is not about legalities, Allison. This is about your sister having nowhere to sleep tonight. The apartment is completely empty. There are air mattresses at Target for under $50, I suggested, or she could stay at your house. The guest room renovations Must be finished by now, right? Another silence. Longer this time. I realized with sudden clarity that there probably never had been any renovations. It had all been an excuse, nothing more. "Where are you?" he finally asked. "I have a new apartment," I said, not volunteering the address. "It's smaller, but it's mine." "This is not over," he warned. "Your mother is beside herself. Stephanie is crying. Is that what you wanted? To hurt your family?" The guilt trip almost worked. Almost. But I held firm. What I wanted was to be treated with respect. I replied evenly. What I wanted was for my boundaries to be acknowledged. What I wanted was to not have my kindness taken for granted. "So this is what? Revenge? Some kind of childish tantrum because we asked you to help your sister?" "No, Dad. This is me making a choice about my own life. I paid rent for the final 30 days, as required. Stephanie can stay there if she wants, but she'll need to get her own furniture." I heard my mother's voice in the background, demanding the phone. There was a rustling sound, and then her tear-filled voice came through. "How could you do this to your sister, to us, after everything we've done for you?" "Mom," I said gently, "I have done nothing wrong. I simply moved out of an apartment that was no longer working for me, taking my own possessions with me. But where is Stephanie supposed to sleep? There's nothing left." "The same place she would have slept if I had never lived there in the first place," I said. "The apartment was unfurnished when I moved in. Remember?" That simple fact seemed to stop her short. There was a long pause before she spoke again. Her voice was different now. "You really moved everything out in one day?" "Yes." "And you have a new place already? You planned all this?" "Yes." Another pause. "I never thought you would actually leave." There was something in her tone. Not quite respect, but perhaps the beginnings of it. A recognition that I wasn't the same pushover they had always assumed me to be. The conversation ended shortly after with vague threats about discussions to come and decisions to be made. I hung up, feeling drained, but strangely peaceful. For the first time in my adult life, I had drawn a line and held it despite the emotional manipulation and guilt trips that had always worked in the past. Later that evening, I received a surprising text from my father. Asterisk, the apartment looks different. Empty. I had forgotten what it looked like before you moved in. We will talk more tomorrow. Asterisk, it wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was an acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. In the weeks that followed my dramatic departure, I adjusted to life in my new apartment. The space was indeed much smaller, requiring creative organization and some difficult decisions about what possessions to keep. My king-sized bed dominated the bedroom, leaving barely enough space to walk. My beloved sectional sofa had to be split into its component pieces to fit the living area. My dining table now served double duty as a desk and eating surface. Yet, despite the constraints, there was a lightness to my new home that had nothing to do with square footage. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt truly in control of my space and my life. Every object was exactly where I wanted it. Every decision, from when to do laundry to what temperature to set the thermostat, was mine alone. The peace that came with this autonomy was worth far more than the extra space I had left behind. I introduced myself to my new neighbors, something I'd never bothered to do in my previous building. To my delight, the woman across the hall was a graphic designer who worked from home and invited me to join her for coffee on our shared rooftop garden. The older gentleman next door offered to water my plants when I traveled. Gradually, I built a small community in my new building, creating connections that felt genuine and supportive. Meanwhile, the situation with my family evolved in unexpected ways. Stephanie, faced with an empty apartment and no one to cater to her needs, found herself forced to make changes. According to my mother's reluctant updates, she had taken a part-time job at a local boutique, similar to her previous position. It wasn't much, but it was a start toward financial independence. My parents, after the initial shock and anger subsided, seemed to be going through a period of reflection. My father particularly appeared to be reconsidering his role in enabling Stephanie's dependence. During a brief phone conversation 2 weeks after my move, he asked questions about my new place without the judgment I had expected. "Are you managing okay with the budget?" he inquired, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes," I replied honestly. "It's tighter than before, but I'm making it work. The location is actually better for my commute, which saves on transportation costs." "That's good," he said awkwardly. "Your mother and I have been talking about Stephanie, about some patterns we might have encouraged over the years." It was as close to an acknowledgement of their favoritism as I had ever heard. And while it wasn't an apology, it felt like progress. My relationship with my mother remained strained. She continued to see my actions as a betrayal of family loyalty rather than a necessary step toward healthy boundaries. Our conversations were short and superficial, focusing on weather and work rather than the emotional elephant in the room. Stephanie, surprisingly, was the first to reach out in a meaningful way. A month after my departure, she texted, asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, curious about what she wanted, but determined to maintain my boundaries. We met at a neutral cafe, halfway between our respective homes. She looked different somehow, with less makeup and simpler clothes than her usual stylish outfits. "So," she said, after we'd ordered our drinks, "your new place is good." "It is," I confirmed. "Different, but good." She nodded, fidgeting with her napkin. "I didn't think you would really leave. None of us did." "I know. It was kind of badass, actually," she admitted with a small smile. The look on Dad's face when we walked into that empty apartment. I wish I had taken a picture. Despite myself, I laughed. It wasn't about revenge, you know. "I know that now," she said, looking down at her coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about all this stuff, about how I've always expected people to take care of me, how I never really had to face consequences because someone always bailed me out." I remained silent, letting her continue at her own pace. "When you left, it was like suddenly I had to figure things out. Mom and Dad brought over an air mattress, but it was uncomfortable, and I hated it. So I got a job to buy my own bed. And once I started working again, I realized I actually like having my own money, not having to ask for everything." "That's great, Steph," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "I'm still staying at the apartment," she added quickly, "but I'm paying rent now. Not much, but something. And I'm looking for a roommate situation for when the lease ends." We talked for nearly 2 hours, longer than we had spoken in years. For the first time, it felt like a conversation between equals rather than the familiar dynamic of her taking and me giving. As we parted, she hugged me awkwardly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for being such a terrible sister." "You weren't terrible," I corrected her. "We just had unhealthy patterns, all of us." The healing process with my family continued slowly over the following months. There were setbacks and difficult conversations, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. My mother still occasionally tried to make me feel guilty for abandoning Stephanie. My father still sometimes slipped into his authoritative role, dispensing unwanted advice about my finances or career. But something fundamental had changed. They could no longer assume my compliance or take my support for granted. Each interaction required mutual respect, or it simply didn't happen. I declined invitations that felt like obligations and accepted only those that felt genuine. I offered help when I could do so without resentment and said no when I couldn't. 6 months after my move, we gathered for Thanksgiving at my parents' house. The atmosphere was different. tentative but not unpleasant. Stephanie brought a dessert she had baked herself. I brought a bottle of wine I could genuinely afford. My father carved the turkey with less ceremony than usual, and my mother asked about my new neighbors with what seemed like genuine interest. As we ate, I looked around the table at these people who had shaped me in both positive and negative ways. I felt neither the resentment that had driven me away nor the desperate need for approval that had kept me compliant for so long. Instead, I felt a calm acceptance, a recognition that we were all flawed individuals doing our best with the emotional tools we had. The greatest lesson I learned through this experience wasn't about furniture or apartments or even money. It was about the difference between love and enabling, between generosity and being taken advantage of. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to set clear boundaries and hold them firm, even when it's painful. I also discovered the value of true independence, not just financial but emotional. The security of knowing I could stand on my own, make difficult decisions, and navigate their consequences gave me a confidence that permeated every aspect of my life. My work improved, my friendships deepened, and my sense of self strengthened. Today, 1 year after that dramatic moving day, I sit in my small but cherished apartment, surrounded by the same furniture that once filled a larger space. But now, it feels perfectly right for where I am. I've added new pieces chosen specifically for this home, and let go of others that no longer serve me. In many ways, that's what the entire experience taught me about life. We hold on to relationships, patterns, and expectations that once fit but may have become uncomfortable or constraining. Having the courage to assess what truly serves us, to keep what nurtures our growth, and release what restricts, is perhaps the most important skill we can develop. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where your kindness was mistaken for weakness, where your boundaries were repeatedly crossed, or where you felt trapped by others' expectations, know that you have the right and the power to make a change. It may not be easy, and it may not happen overnight, but taking that first step toward honoring your own needs can transform not just your life, but the lives of those around you in ways you might never expect. What about you? Have you ever had to draw a really tough boundary with family? And how did it turn out? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.